Hello everybody, so this is the Tarocchi Fine della Torre, a Bologna variety of Tarocchi. This is produced by, pardon my pronunciation, Museo Internazionale dei Tarocchi, the International Museum of Tarot, I'm guessing. This distribution, I believe, was realized by Arnel Ando. It's a bit confusing as to who I was talking to, but I think I was talking to someone from the museum shop itself. So here it says Luglio 2016. I have had this on my wish list for a really long time. So first let's have a look at the box. It is pretty rudimentary, but I think it's brilliant for $70. This is their quote-unquote normal edition. I had initially thought that to get the wooden box you need to purchase the deluxe edition, but I think the deluxe edition allows you to choose the staining between this and that. I could have sworn somewhere in there that you can choose the staining. So long story short, there's some miscommunication, and after some email going back and forth, it was sorted out. And all I wanted was the basic deck and the box. And so I think for $70 US, judging from how much some people are charging for their deck, $70 for this is, I personally believe, is quite good. Actually, it's more than quite good. It's rather good. It's rather brilliant. So it's all, the joinery is perfect. It's very important, especially on a box like this, because just a little bent on the edges here, it could really screw up the whole sliding motion, the whole closing and opening mechanism. And so that's it for the box. So you can see a bit of the stapling there, but as I said again, I think everything, well, not everything, but in relation to the price, whether something is good or not. So this is like Il Meneghello's style, where they put just the cover card with ink, a little bit of dribble there, which I think add to the charm. Let's go straight to the cards, 78 cards, and it has a little bit of this underneath. There's also a bit of, be careful if you have flammables like that, just some stuff keep, that kind of debris. Anyway, I'll clean that later. But so 78 cards. The cardstock reminds me of Il Meneghello's cardstock. That really thick art paper feel to it. But even the sliding reminds me of that. So it's beautiful. It's probably an Italian manufacturer, Italian cardstock source in Italy, maybe, I'm not sure, but I won't be surprised if the cardstock came from the same people. So okay, let's put this aside for now. Cover, the back is utterly charming, utterly charming. It's like Cupid playing bows and arrow there. There's a heart dangling from a tree. So I'll show you the majors perhaps. Let's have a look at the majors. It's the Fool, Magician, very much in keeping with the older style magician. That's a street, almost like that. What do you put something underneath a cup and then you swap them around and you guess which cup has the thing underneath it. So sleight of hand, I guess in this case, is the magician in this sort of sleight of hand understanding of it. This is the Bopesse, the Empress, The color is utterly charming. The Emperor. You've probably seen a flip through of this. This is not a new deck. It's and you've seen. Oh, interesting. That's a stigmata. So the Pope has a stigmata on his hands. This is the Lovers, and it looks like the lady is a bit aghast there. Fountain, the Cupid is utterly with vision, so he is no longer portrayed as this random blind of like Fortune, where you don't know when the next arrow is going to hit. This one's a bit more directed. It's clearly directed at one person. Interesting. Well, this is yeah, it's sort of, I like the blindfold Cupid because if it gives that sense of uncontrollable fate, while the Chariot is free will, controllable direction, controllable fate, if there is such a thing, if that's not an oxymoron, going opposite direction but looking at each other. So that's interesting. This is Justice. I absolutely love this Father Time Hermit. Not quite sure. Has a belt, a pouch. I wonder what the story behind this is. Wings, a pair of wings. A hat that looks a bit like a turban. And a pillar behind him. That's quite fascinating. The Wheel of Fortune with a variety of the usual things. What is this? Is this Strength? Because we have Justice already. So will this be Strength? Because that's number 11. The Hanged Man. Death. Temperance. Devil. Interesting that the Devil now has a pitchfork. There's a whole analysis about the evolution of the depiction of the so-called devil, or the idea of the devil. This is the Tower. The Star. Interestingly, this person has triple crown, or is that dual crown? So is he the Pope? And the Moon has this astronomer here. Usually the astronomers, well, not usually, but in the Vieville Tower, I believe the astronomer is looking at the stars instead of the moon. So that's interesting. That's a moon, but those are also the stars. They're little ones. Oh, excuse me. I've just knocked the tablet there. Now this is what I found fascinating as well, because in the Vieville Tarot, the woman with the spindle is a little older, and it's under, and she's sitting under the moon. Here, she's sitting under the sun. And the astronomers, people with this kind of devices, and the Vieville sits under the stars, while here, under the stars, are this Pope-like figure, seemingly, I don't know, this one seems to look like he has a crown. That one looks like he's giving one of them something. Is he crowning one of these guys? I mean, in those days, the church is above the kings, and the kings are all crowned by the Pope, by the church, don't they? Didn't they? So that's interesting. Judgment, Resurrection, the Angel. And then the World here seems to be Hermes or Hermes. Looks like he has a bit of a pot belly. And underneath here is some kind of window, almost. Like the city's on fire, I'm not sure. This reminds me of a nautical window instead of the world. Caduceus. And yeah, so that's interesting. God of Messengers of the Gods. Authority. Is that the church and the... I'm not so good with my symbolism. Something about why kings and empresses and emperors are carrying this usually on a staff. In this case, he's carrying his own thing here. So let's have a look at what the thingy here has to say. After 400 years, a historical tarot deck comes back to life. The International Museum of Tarot sought to publish an ancient Italian deck that was as yet unpublished in the modern era. Something not too far from the model that gave rise to the 18th century iconic illustrations of the so-called Tarot of Marseille, well known to enthusiasts and consequently to a large degree influential over other decks published during subsequent centuries. This choice went to the 17th century exemplary Bolognese deck of cards known as the Fine della Torre, which fortunately was passed down to us nearly complete and in fairly good condition. The only known example is preserved as Tarot Bolognese, the 17th century Tarot Bolognese, by the Bibliothèque Nationale in Paris. Bibliothèque Nationale Paris, etc., etc., etc. The original card size was 105 by 43 millimeters, or 4.1 inches by 1.7 inches, and the trumps were printed unnumbered, although became numbered by hand afterwards. In the new edition, the card size is 7 by 15 centimeters, or 2.7 by 5.9 inches. So, interesting. So that's a bit more elongated because the longer size is longer. Is that right? No, it's bigger. That's 10 by 4. This is 7. Okay, this is bigger. This is bigger than the original. At the time of production, being a Bolognese style deck meant it would be reduced from the traditional tarot deck of 78 to 62 cards, eliminating the minor arcana number 2, 3, 4, and 5 of each suit. Following the custom in vogue in Bologna since at least the mid-16th century. Of the original 62, only 6 cards remain lost to time: 6, 7, 8, and 9 of swords, the Queen of Cups, and the Queen of Coins. It is a similar deck to modern successors such as the Tarocchi Bolognese, but at the same time has many resemblances to its ancestors of the 16th century, with the notable exception of the Devil card. At least with regards to the 12 surviving images of trumps on 2 incomplete sheets from the last decade of the 15th century. The first is in the Bibliothèque, the École Nationale Supérieure, I don't speak or read French, Masson collection on Catalogue Paris. The second is in the other museum in Louvre, Rothschild collection in Paris. Curiosity over this precious deck of tarot cards. In this early tarot deck, there are still traditional depictions of the High Priestess, Empress, Emperor, and Pope that were viewed unfavorably by authorities of the Papal States, and which were subsequently replaced in Tarocchino Bolognese, first by 2 popes and 2 emperors, by at least 1669, and eventually by images of the 4 Moors during the late 17th century. From the perspective of symbolism, this deck shows extremely interesting details, particularly when compared to traditional portrayal of the cards. The High Priestess and Pope are the most remarkable cards of the major arcana. The High Priestess holds keys and makes a blessing with a Latin gesture, while the Pope has a closed book and holds a cross. The latter also reveals stigmata on his hands and has a youthful, beardless face that is decidedly feminine. The details of his papal tiara, a triple crown without button or cross, suggest a hypothetical design dating between 1342 and 1503. All face cards of the major arcana are interesting from a historic and symbolic point of view, while the court cards consistently reflect complementary qualities of courtly pairing in an aesthetically pleasing manner. The distinction between male suits, wands and swords, and female cups and coins is all too evident with the obvious presence of two female chambermaids. However, in this regards, there are many other significant details, such as the postures of these characters, their attire, attributes, and ageless appearance. The Ten of Coins has the inscription Carte fine della Torre in Bologna, with 17th century typography. These words are capitalized and displayed vertically. Most likely one of many heirs of an abundant production of cards that was documented in Bologna with the manufacturer Pietro Bonozzi since at least 1477, while their presence was certified in town since at least 1459. Refer to the Tarot Travel Guide of Italy, 2015, page 50, by Morena Poltronieri, Ernesto Fazioli, and Arnel Ando. The back of the cards. On the back of the cards are two winged angels. One is the classic Cupid with bow and arrow, while the other points to a large tree with a heart hanging like fruit. This is probably a reference to the myth of Apollo and Daphne, both struck by arrows of Eros, but with opposite results. Apollo fell in love with Daphne, while she flatly refused his advances after a long chase through the woods. So as not to give in to the passions of the god of oracles, this nymph prayed for an escape and was thus transformed into a sweetly scented laurel plant. The reference is Ovid, Metamorphoses, Chapter 1, pages 452 to 567, known as Daphne in Greek, and which consequently became the symbolic tribute to great poets in ancient Greece. Work on the cards. In April 2014, Morena Poltronieri and Ernesto Fazioli of the International Museum of Tarot began the challenge of returning this precious Bolognese tarot of the 17th century back to production. The original 56 cards of the Bibliothèque Nationale in Paris are engraved on wood with a colorful facade. Poltronieri and Fazioli did not perform an actual restorative process directly on these cards, but rather worked on the images digitally through various color definition phases, both with pastels and by utilizing computer graphics. The first step was to print the image in A4 format and then define the contours and colors using professional pastels. The refined images were then scanned and set in Photoshop to clean up smudges caused by time and wear. One of the goals was to not interfere creatively with the look of these cards, but to preserve the original freshness, which is characteristic of the era and a valuable and distinctive artwork. The end result is respectful of the unique designs, contours, and colors, while adding a greater definition to the innate beauty and appearance inherent in the original imagery. The missing queens, cups, and coins have been redesigned and processed through Photoshop, while referring to the court cards of an 18th century double-sided Tarocchino Bolognese, which is part of the permanent collection of the Tarot Museum. For us, the fruit of the labor will be in sharing the revival of one of the most important Italian tarot works of distant past. After nearly 4 centuries, this quintessential 17th century deck is again available. This text was written by Giovanni Bellosini and is part of his complete work on the tarot entitled Tarot Mirrors of Infinity, where for the first time in history, an accurate description of these cards is shared in the hopes that this deck is still used and handed down to, it sort of end there. And handed down to, and then it's a whole Italian section here. Okay, so that's missing a little bit, I suppose, but we've got the idea. It's like it's missing a line there. So that's what it says. And that's the Fool. It's number 21 there. No, not the Fool, sorry, the World. That's very quickly. It's the Minor. Well, we've just lost the background music there, so never mind. I will be using this majors only, as I have been doing with the other older historical reproduction decks. I think I may have spoken about my approach to majors only and why I think it's alright. I might need to talk about that specifically in a separate video, but I made sure I included that in the title so that it's searchable. This is the one. Dalla Torre in Bologna. Rosette, the Queen of Coins, that was have to recreate it. Okay, that's not the Queen. That's the Queen. It's utterly charming, absolutely charming. The cardstock's wonderful. For the price, the wooden box is great. If I have to pay any more money, then I might feel slightly dissatisfied by the box because it's very rudimentary. But for $70, a wooden box, no matter how basic it is, and with all this mechanism intact and aligned properly, it's actually very, very good. I'm very pleased with that. Again, to give context, a lot of independently produced decks are $70 or more often, and some out of print decks that are not qualitatively in itself are not at all very nice, and probably, well, it's a bit difficult, isn't it, to say what something is worth when it's out of print, because it's all relative to demand and supply. But so let's not talk about out of print decks, but of all the ones that's still available for prints, it is a little rough around the edges, this box, but it is for $70, it is brilliant. It's just brilliant. So great product, a great deck of cards there, and I played around with it and it's been brilliant so far. So there it is. Tarocchi fine della Torre of Bologna.